Welcome to everyone who is here joining us at SPCUNY. I'm going to give it just a minute for folks to get in from our waiting room in this webinar. We have a good number of registrations for this SPCUNY webinar today, and it's good to see folks coming through. We have a bunch of folks representing SPCUNY here to chat with you. And my name's Catherine, and again, I'm just giving it I see more and more people coming in every 10 seconds. So I'm just going to let a few more folks come in the room before I get into our introductions. Welcome. Good morning if you're in the New York time zone with us. I cheers you with my coffee as I caffeinate with this warm beverage. And good to be here with you. Okay. I think I think we can just get started and maybe more folks will also continue to come through. But just want to say welcome to everybody who's here and also in the room with me. This is the informational session for anyone who's interested in applying for the student fellowship at SPCUNY for the upcoming academic year of 2025-2026. This is a year-long cohort fellowship. We take applications for student fellowships and faculty fellowships. The student fellowship is open to any graduate student across CUNY's campuses who is entering at least their second year of coursework. If you're a PhD student who has completed coursework, you're going to want to wait for the faculty fellowship application cycle, and we can answer any questions you may have about eligibility, et cetera, before this webinar is over. We're going to, each of us who are here in the room with you from SPCUNY, we're just going to say a few minutes introduction about who we are, a little bit about our connection to SPCUNY, maybe a couple words about the fellowship itself, and we're going to spend the bulk of this session on your questions. So I'll be monitoring those questions. We'll get them started ideally before 1/2 past to get questions going. And you can put questions in the Q&A or in the chat. If you'd like either way, I will look at both and we'll get to those after our brief introductions. So just to say hello, I'm Catherine Lasota. I'm the Associate Director at Social Practice CUNY. I work with the fellows on some networking events, public programming. We started a podcast this year called Part of the Practice, where I'm in conversation with a different fellow and they publish every 2 weeks. You can find that anywhere podcasts are if you want to hear from some of our current fellows, part of the practice. And I'm also going to be working on some more public programming as we come into the next year. And we really like working with different organizations in the city and connections with our fellows to really work both within CUNY, but beyond CUNY and beyond the CUNY campus. So I will stop there for the sake of hearing from a lot of great folks in the room here today. And I will go ahead and pass it to each of our co-directors in turn, beginning with Chloe Bess.
Hi, my name is Chloe. I am one of the two co-directors of SPCUNY along with Greg Gillette. I have also been faculty at Queens College where I teach studio art and have been sometimes the chair of the MFA program. I am an artist and a writer and do a lot of things in and through this world, but have been working on this project for its entirety of being SPCUNY since 2021. And I can go ahead and pass it to Greg.
Hey, thank you, Chloe. Thank you, Catherine. Hello, everybody. Can't see you, but I'm sure you're out there. I will be teaching the class in the fall at the Graduate Center, which is where I am affiliated doctoral faculty. I'm also at Queens College, and very much looking forward to working with you guys. I can tell you more about the class in a couple of minutes. I have to leave a little early today, but I'll leave it at that, and I'll pass it on to Corey.
Hi, everybody. I'm Corey Tamler. I am one of the program coordinators for SPCUNY. I've been working with SPCUNY also for the entirety of its time as SPCUNY, and helped worked closely with Chloe and Greg to sort of develop the infrastructural and bureaucratic para-institutional structures that make SPCUNY work across CUNY campuses and bring in fellows from across CUNY campuses. at both the graduate and the faculty level. And I am also a PhD candidate in theater and performance at the Graduate Center. And I've taught at Brooklyn College. I have a writing and a research and performance practice that's also very related to, very within the social practice world. And I am, yeah, excited to hear your questions that you have about the application process and eligibility and the experience of being in the cohort. And I'll pass it to Jacqueline since she is also a program coordinator.
Hi, thanks, Corey. Hi, everyone. I am Jacqueline Marie Shannon. I am the other SPCUNY program coordinator, and I handle everything related to getting you paid and managing the funds getting to your account. So if you have questions about that, that is something that I'm happy to answer for you. This is my second year with SPCUNY, and it's an extraordinary program with extraordinary people doing extraordinary projects that are extraordinarily important right now. So you're in a really good place, and I'm excited to hear what kinds of questions you have. I am also a PhD candidate in theater and performance, and we've had some theater and performance folks in SPCUNY, but also folks from across the disciplines. So that's one of the most exciting things about it. And as someone who works also in social practice proximal work that is very interdisciplinary, it's a really special space for people like I'm sure you are, who are working across modes. So glad you're here. And I'll pass it to Django.
Yes. Hey, y'all. Good morning. I'm Django Mahmood. I was a student fellow a couple of years ago. I believe it was the 23-24 academic year. Right now, I'm still enrolled in school. I'm earning my master's in social work as a student at Hunter College in the East Harlem campus. Hey, I describe myself as a cultural organizer. I'm a curator. I was in your shoes again 2 years ago. I remember learning about the program and wanted to know more, filling out the application, of course. So I'm here to offer those perspectives from that side. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, everyone. So as you can see, we have a good range of different angles here that you can ask questions about either the experience of being in the fellowship year or experience of applying, what that process is, any questions you may have about the application process. Just to say that the student fellowship is a full academic year that includes a required registration in a seminar in the fall, a weekly seminar, and a registration and weekly seminar in the spring. So we're happy to answer questions about that. It also comes with a $4,000 fellowship to support your own social practice art project, which you would include some information about in the application process, as well as 4 meetings a year with the entire cohort. That means with your fellow student fellows, as well as with the faculty fellows who will be joining you for the year. And we also do other gatherings that are non-required throughout the year so that you can spend time with each other, network, share resources. So that's, and then there's a public program requirement for yourself as part of the fellowship year. So there's different aspects to the year. And I did open the chat so that you can, if you are an attendee here, put something in the chat if you'd like, or just say hello if you'd like. And also the Q&A is open as well if you'd like to. And if you do have a question, please do type it in the chat, because the only people who are on screen are the SPCUNY folks you see here. But as I start monitoring questions that you do type into the chat, I'm going to go ahead and ask Greg, since he's with us here, and he would be teaching the fall seminar that any student fellow would be required to take, if you could just say a few words about what that seminar experience is like and how he structures it.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. So usually what I do is invite interesting outside people from various disciplines to talk with, present their work and engage with students. It's quite wide ranging, and I'm going to put in the chat all of the semesters that I've taught, because they go back a number of years now, and you can see the various guests that I've brought in. Django was in the class, so she can also talk a little bit about how that went. It's going to be a very curious time to be having this class. My own background is as an artist, but I'm also a writer, published a number of books, mostly focusing on socially engaged art, but specifically work that is very political and activist. So you can imagine with what's going on, I have quite a few opinions, and I'm working on a new book precisely about that, which is why I have to jump off. But I would say that it'll be leaning towards a lot of the questions that are probably on all our minds, including, of course, Palestine, including the situation with universities, including, what's going on with this cultural shift that we're experiencing as this thing called MAGA, sort of begins to sort of accelerate in the US, but also looking at it internationally, because it's been happening for years now, since early 2000s, but certainly ramping up since 2015. So probably have international guests speaking about things happening there as well. And I'm always interested to hear what students say, like, I would like to have this person, I would like to have that person, or could you find someone on this topic? Let me know. I will do my best to sort of try to cover that and fit it in. And we'll do some readings, we'll do some discussion, there'll be some presentations. It's a Monday afternoon from 2 to 4. Sometimes we go an extra half an hour. Yeah, I think that covers everything. Django, is there anything I should say that I'm forgetting?
I just want to emphasize how the network of guest speakers that we had during Greg's class, there are connections that I've been able to sustain even after the duration of, again, my fellowship. I'm thinking specifically about how Coco Reed, who's this incredible writer and archiver about, all these rallies and liberatory practices and protests that were happening, especially in CUNY campuses from back in the day, is someone that I come across frequently at all these different conferences and protests and rallies that I go to. So it's really awesome to actually sustain these relationships that we build in the classroom and then practice outside in the field.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Django. I see that.
I'll just put the stuff in the chat. I'm going to be quiet, but you can ask me questions, or you can send me an email later. Thanks.
Yep. And sorry, Corey, go ahead. I was going to get to the questions that I see coming through.
Yeah, I was just going to encourage, just because the question I see wasn't about the seminar, but I just think it might be helpful to quickly share what point, because it is kind of an eligibility thing, but also like a personal or something to think about as someone thinking about applying when you're assessing if this program makes sense for you, which is what you should hopefully all be doing here. What point kind of in people's studies does it make sense for them to be in these seminars? And like, what are you, do you know what I mean? Like, they're not introductory seminars to like the small practicalities of making an artwork for the first time, for example.
I guess that's a question for Greg in terms of like how you see, or I mean, maybe in Django about, this class fitting into people's line of study.
I'll just say that, we don't look at the class as here's how you make social practice art. You'll certainly get lots of examples of how people do that, but it's not like it's not a practice-based class. It really is more about the theory and history and a snapshot of like where actual practitioners are, what they're doing, etc. So that should be clear. On the side, I can always meet you in office hours and other things, and we can certainly discuss, aspects of your.
Yeah, the SPCUNY staff and, assorted associates have always been available for project mentorship and outside conversations about projects, and we try to do that in as timely a basis as possible, everybody's crazy schedules permitting, including your crazy schedule permitting. So if you are looking for that kind of one-on-one guidance, it is available to some extent, but it's not how the class is structured.
Thank you. It's a good point.
The network is always there. And yes, as a student, I mentioned that I was a social work student, so I didn't necessarily have that background in art history, or I didn't have studio practice one part of my schedule. It's a type of really great 101 class about all the theories, as Greg mentioned. So you could come to class however you are. There's not much that you need practice for.
Great. Yeah. We are starting to get more questions coming through. They're not specifically about Greg's class, though. If I do see one pop up before 10:30, I'll be sure to prioritize that since he'll be leaving at that time. But there is a really quick one that just came in at the end about eligibility. I think we can answer pretty quickly from a student at the Graduate Center who just started this spring semester and wants to know about eligibility, or would he need to apply for the next cohort. And we do ask that you be entering your second year of class, that you've completed a year of coursework. And that's primarily to make sure you have a real grounding in your home program, because our requirements, our courses are going to fit into your coursework and your degree program in a different way depending on what you're in, and we need to make sure you're grounded in your own home program before applying. So that in that case, we would be looking for students who have completed a full year of coursework to apply for this coming year. But I do see what you're working on, Pedro, and there's definitely lots of stuff going on at SPCUNY related to that. So I hope that you can join us at some events. We have a lot of applications about the application, a lot of questions about the application process, and I'm going to start there. We did put some things in the chat there. Thank you, Chloe, about past projects that fellows have worked on to kind of give you an idea of what kind of project you might be putting in your application. The question here is curious about the requirements for the project proposal in the application. And those links in the chat are examples of current and past students and what they've done. And I guess the big question here is how fully fleshed out should the project proposal be? And we do put some indications there in the application about we have specific questions about the proposal, but we also know that things might change with your proposal over time. I'm going to let Chloe answer that one too, because she also just put that link in the chat with all the past projects.
Yeah, so the answer is within the application, we would like to have a sense of the general theme of your project, the outside to CUNY community that you're thinking about working with or have already worked with and are continuing to work with, right? People are coming in at different levels of engagement. We understand that for some people, this will be the first time doing a project of this nature. And for some people, like Django, for example, who has an organizing background, this is one in a string of a million things that you're doing that can fit in through this particular angle. And you know, we want a sense of like, what is it gonna look like? Are you a person who's intending to make a film, a painting, a protest? But we don't need to know all of the details or the exact timeline. We do ask that your project is something that can be reasonably completed to the degree of having a public event before the end of the academic year. We have sometimes let those projects bleed over into the following summer, but you don't get more financial support if your project goes over time. We just don't bother you about it. And so, you know, keeping in mind, like, what is in the parameters of what you are already working on and what you can do. And we really have designed this project to try to support the types of things that people are already doing, not necessarily for people to invent a project in order to be in the program. And actually, Carmen had a bunch of questions, but one thing I'm going to tack on is, yes, your proposed work does have to be social practice work, 100%.
Yeah, and we can get into this. That's really great. We can get into some of those additional questions that Carmen had because when you find out about acceptance to the program or not, I think that's a simple question we can answer because we do. What is the deadline that we have set for that? Because we know people are
It will
planning their
be
years.
before the end of the semester. Everyone will be notified before the end of the semester. We're aiming for the second week in May. It will depend on, to some extent, on the number of applications and how quickly people accept their offers.
That's right. Yes.
And also someone asked about the award. It is one $4,000 award. It's paid as a CUNY fellowship, and if any of this is a further concern for anyone, you can ask more questions about it. But just overall to say what that means is that it gets dispersed into your CUNY First account, and if you have any negative balances in there, it automatically, this is not under our control, it pays those balances first. Otherwise, we don't control how you use that money. I think Catherine said it's for project support, but that's not strictly true. It is unrestricted funds for you to do with as you need. And you can use it for your project, but we don't require receipts or anything like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. We're not going to ask you for a detailed budget of how you spent this money. You are going to get this
Can I
money
just
if you're a fellow.
insert, did we mention that there's also faculty fellows that of course won't be in the class?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, okay, just so
Yeah.
people
And
understand.
Jacqueline wanted to say something.
Yeah, just because we're talking about the fellowship funds, just something to keep in mind as you're proposing your projects, that it takes some time for the funds to get to your account, and also depends on what campus you're coming from in terms of how long that takes. So as you're planning, don't assume necessarily that you would have, you know, the money up front in the very beginning of the semester, if you're thinking about a timeline. Again, that depends, but just to keep that in mind.
Yeah, keep in mind that this is working through a CUNY system, and anyone who's been here for a full academic year of courses has dealt with CUNY before, so hopefully you understand what we're saying here when sometimes things come on a delay. But just to, I
This is
see
the
we have,
time when I say the thing I always say, which is if we were allowed to just cut you a check directly, we would, but we are not allowed to do that. So it has to go through CUNY.
and for full transparency on our end, we are a Mellon funded project. And then we operate through CUNY. We don't write a check out of a CUNY checkbook and send it to you. There's a lot of steps it has to go through to get to you, including through your own home department and whatever else is going on your end that we don't have full access to.
Yeah.
So, but Jacqueline will work very, very well and closely as possible to help you with that.
There's another financial related question to maybe
I'm getting through all those because there's a lot coming through that the program does not still cover tuition. We did have a separate fellowship for Queens College students that did. We are doing something different in the coming year where we are increasing the fellowship award and giving it to more students across all the campuses. So there is no tuition coverage anymore. It is just a fellowship award. And the question about whether this fellowship or whether the courses cover some credit and what credit exactly in your program
Can
they
I
cover,
actually
we can't.
jump in? That's a
Yeah.
Queens College question specifically. I know, Carmen.
You know that one, okay.
Yes. So I'm just gonna, sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just gonna answer the question directly. Carmen, yes, you can use that credit for art history at Queens College. Everyone else who is on this call, you have to talk to your program advisor about how this elective fits into the work that you're doing in your program. That is not something that we determine for you. That is not something that we can decide. We're happy to talk to your program advisors if need be, but the conversation starts with you, right? So this is another 3-credit elective seminar, like any other 3-credit elective seminar. And then there's another one in the spring. Somebody asked, do you have to pay for it? Yes, you will be paying for this class in the same way that you would be paying for any series of 3-credit elective seminars. So talk to your advisor or program head about whether you have the space in your degree progress to take these classes.
Yes. Because and again, as Chloe said, like how it may fit into your outside of Queens College, you need to talk to your advisor about that. Chloe knows the answer for Queens College, but if it fulfills a requirement for your degree program, and if it doesn't, then you're adding other credits on, you need to talk to your advisor about that. Just in the same question there, will the seminars, because it's a seminar question, Greg, will the seminars also be a space to develop and support each other's projects? Do you want to speak directly to how student projects might come in there?
Yeah, we've built in the last year or so time to sit, so it's not always like a lecture, it's not always someone coming in, time to sit and talk and exchange ideas. We've did a few of those. Sometimes we meet off campus, by the way, and that would probably be the case in the fall, possibly at Creative Time headquarters, which is downtown Manhattan. So all of that I'll make clear as I shape up what we're going to do. But yes, there'll be time to discuss with each other. And again, I'm always available to help with ideas, as is everyone else.
Yeah, in broad strokes, right? The classes are not focused on the projects, but the projects can come into the classes. Which is to say, like, we are always interested in the work that you're actually doing and how it fits into the coursework that we are also providing for you. But it's not going to be just like a sit and focus on your project class. You will have opportunities to do that at other times. We also do set up student faculty mentorship, not mentorships, buddy system between the Faculty fellows and the student fellows, those are actually like a co-learning process, not a mentorship process where you're co-learning along with the faculty fellow who's co-learning, but this is also a chance for you to have someone to talk about your project with. This is a new thing that we instigated this year. It's a lot of fun. It brings people closer together. And then in terms of the spring seminar, that's actually going to be taught by a teaching scholar in residence who has not yet been selected. So we don't know the structure and content of that class yet, but we are looking forward to picking somebody who's proposing something truly exciting and also fits in line with the types of things that people would be doing and the structure of our existing program.
Yeah, and Django, do you want to say anything? I know that our buddy system of faculty and students was not in place during your year, but do you want to say anything about how you worked on your project in the context or not of the seminars during your fellowship year?
Sure, I could share about how I especially, when Greg mentioned being at Creative Time, I remember those offsite locations sometimes offer more space to be a bit more creative and maybe a bit more fluid in our speech and our just proposals that we had. It's really important for us to connect with our peers, especially. We really relied on our own peer-to-peer type of connection as people, as students in the cohort. So definitely your ideas will evolve. What the project I applied with in my proposal, my application is completely different from what I actually ended up executing. So also keeping that in mind, especially as a socially engaged community, we respond to what's urgent in the moment. So of course, what I applied with 6 months ago compared to when I actually received the funds and when I was actually dedicated and focusing on my project, it was something different than what I applied with. So there's always that to keep in mind as well.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a couple of questions. Speaking of that, like changing over time that you mentioned, Django, with your project, Chloe did clarify something in the chat. We'll make sure we say it out loud for anyone who's watching the recording in terms of your project that you proposed does need to be social practice, but there's a clarification on the question, do the work samples need to be social practice? And the answer is no. But if we want to say anything else about the work samples, because we are requiring images with that, Chloe, would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because someone also asked for the hallmarks of a successful application. I mean, this is my advice for people generally, but also specifically. The hallmarks of a successful application almost all the time is that you clearly answer the questions that were actually asked, right? And this is like art career advice for your life, take it freely. But basically, our application is not extremely lengthy, and everything that we're asking is something that we really need to know in order to figure out if you're a good fit for this program. So we want to hear your best thoughts towards your proposed project. We want to hear your clearest way of describing who you already are. Don't assume that we know who you already are. Just tell us, right? Even if I do happen to know you, it's really better because I am not the only person looking at these applications for you to describe clearly who you are and what you do. I would say for work samples, yes, as I put in the chat and as Catherine just clarified, like they don't need to be social practice because we know that not everybody is coming in having done that work already or doing it now, but we want to see a more contemporary selection of projects, right? If you've been doing this for a long time, but your work has significantly changed over time, don't send us your best work from 5 years ago. Send us the direction of work that you're actually working on now and the things that you're most excited about now. This is not an application that's actually evaluating you for art quality in the same way that a grant or an exhibition would. We're actually trying to evaluate you for your thinking and interests. So if you show us what you're really thinking about and interested in, that will give us the best sense of who you are. And yeah, saying again what I said at the beginning, just clearly answer the questions we ask, and your application is already much more successful than some we receive.
And that's a good thing to keep in mind for any application process. You will know over time, and maybe you do already know this, as you apply for things, answering the questions clearly cuts out 50% sometimes of the applications that come through. Greg, I know that you need to leave soon, so I want to check in with you.
I'm just going to say it was really great to at least be in touch sort of indirectly. I look forward to meeting some of you in person. I'm going to pop my bio in here just so you can get a little sense of who I am. And good luck. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
The
you,
rest of us
Greg.
though are still here to talk
We're still
about
here.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, and we do have, I want to say a couple questions that got answered again in chats or in the Q&A box so that anyone watching the recording can hear this. We did have the question here about if students who have completed their coursework are eligible to apply. And we do ask that if you are a PhD student who's completed coursework, that you should wait to apply for the faculty fellowship. That's what you would qualify for as an applicant with SPCUNY, not the student fellowship. And that will open in May. And then we also had a couple of excellent notes from Corey here in the chat, suggestions to check out in terms of the coursework and how the seminars might fit into your coursework, to advise you to check out the e-permit process for CUNY campuses, because that's how you will enroll in these seminars. Unless you are a Queens College or a Graduate Center student, then you will enroll directly because we have course numbers for those campuses. Otherwise, you would be enrolling in the e-permit process. Also, a suggestion here, because I see some folks, if you want to drop in the chat also where you're coming in from, what campus, what department you're from, that'd be great for us to know as well. And if we know that there are people in your program who are current fellows, Corey says we can connect you with them if you have questions about how the seminar worked in their course or degree, because that might be another good source of information beyond your advisor as well. We do have time for more questions, and as we wait to see if anyone wants to drop in the chat where they're coming from and what their department is, I want to ask Django if there's anything you wish you'd known in the application process, any advice you have for applicants.
Let's see. I think one of the things I was hoping to emphasize here, especially since I mentioned that I am a candidate for my master's in social work. So I believe previously, this was, students assume that perhaps, you need a studio practice, you have to be an artist. I'm not necessarily those things. I'm not earning my MFA. I think it's really great that there is this opportunity with this fellowship for people who are studying education, who are studying urban planning and architecture, to join this community. Hey, myself as a social worker, the reason why I applied was because I saw how at macro level nonprofits and community groups, there's always some beautiful art making program that's so restorative for memberships. So that's why I thought, hey, let me throw in an application. From my previous experiences organizers, I've helped, put together protest signs that were, beautiful works, or also, let's see, I'm trying to remember what else I imagined, I included rather in my proposal, things that were related to pop-ups that were organized by local council members for a bill that they were championing, and creating some fun activity that was interactive for community members to learn more about this policy. So again, they're not exactly artistic objects, they're interventions. So those are things that I include in my proposal. And then kind of, again, how we mentioned here, it painted a picture about who I am and what I think and what I'm part of, which was how I had this really cool opportunity to join.
Excellent, thank you. And
Thanks.
Corey yeah.
Oh yeah, I thought I could say something just about the kind of standard structure of the year, as part of this cohort, because maybe that'll also jog some specific questions. But at least you all will have kind of a picture of the shape of the year and some of the other things that are available to fellows. So as we said, we endeavor to, everybody who applies will have an answer one way or another before the end of the spring semester. And we then select faculty fellows over the summer. We'll select, because they don't have to know quite as far in advance, they don't have the seminar to sign up for. So we'll be selecting the same number of faculty fellows and student fellows so that we can create this buddy system and pair you up. So probably the first thing that would happen for people who are invited into the cohort after asking you to confirm that you want to participate is that we'll be in touch with you over the summer to have you sign a letter of agreement and to send bureaucratic stuff over to us so that we can start the payment process. Funds take some time to get transferred to your accounts. Jacqueline works on that with heroic speed and fortitude, but unfortunately the business department does not have as much speed and fortitude at many times, and because it works differently in each campus, how the funds are transferred, people shouldn't expect to get the funds right at the very, very beginning of the semester. Unfortunately, we make it work as fast as we can. So beginning of the semester will be paperwork, getting set up with your faculty buddy partner, buddy system partner, working on getting your fellowship processed, and making sure that you start the enrollment process for the seminar as soon as possible, especially if you're an e-permit student. So there's all these kind of like bureaucratic things to get rolling at the beginning, and then in the fall semester, you have the seminar, which will be with Greg, Mondays in person at the Grad Center. There will also be two full cohort meetings that will be scheduled in the fall once the whole cohort is assembled. And those will be your chances to be in the room with, they happen in person generally at the Graduate Center as well, and that's your chance to be in the room with the whole fellowship group, because otherwise you're meeting the other people in the student cohort every week in the seminar. The seminar also includes other students who are not in the cohort because it's open to enrollment from other people, especially at the Grad Center community. It's easy for them to enroll, but it's a slightly broader set of students. Your fellow faculty fellows, the primary chance that you get to see them is at these cohort meetings. So there are two of them in the fall. There are also some more social events that Catherine especially has been organizing. And so there are other opportunities to meet, to gather with each other, but the cohort meetings are where people really get to share about their projects and share and ask questions of the larger SPCUNY network. And that structure kind of repeats in the spring with the second seminar. And with two more cohort meetings. And most people's public projects start to happen in the spring, but there are people, especially some faculty fellows, who come in the fall with a project that's really already underway, and they have some public programs happening in the fall as well. But I did want to mention the public programs. I'm looking up here at my other screen so I can drop the events link in the chat, because we have a couple of events that are coming up that are public programs associated with current fellows projects, and that is something that you can also check out as you're thinking about applying. You might be able to participate in one, but you can also at least see what's an example of kind of a concrete public program that fellows are putting together. Yeah, that's my overview.
I'm so glad you brought up the public programs, because that's also something that's come up in conversations with fellows as this question of what constitutes a public project. And just to say that it's something that takes place outside of a CUNY campus is primarily it. But
the community outside of the CUNY community.
That's right. That's right. Thank you, Chloe, for that clarification. So if there are specific questions about what might constitute a public project, we would be happy to answer those as well. I see a couple of other things I want to make sure we address here. Yeah, I'm Ping, if you could please tell us who you want to be put in touch with. I think I'm missing that. But there's a question about work samples and the language that they're in. And I will say that our fellows work across different languages in their projects and in their work. That being said, there's not going to be tons of space for you to put work samples in. So you're not going to be submitting an entire, for example, book length work or something like that. But for the review of your application, not everyone who's reviewing them will have access to all of the languages you work in. So to keep that in mind. Is there anything else you want to say about that, Chloe?
I have a follow-up question, actually.
Mhm.
I don't know if that question was about work sample or about proposed project. So I will
Mm.
go ahead and say that a straight translation project is not something that we would consider a socially engaged artwork. However, if you want to submit a sample of your translated novel as your work sample, that is totally fine, and we will look forward to reading it.
Django, what did you do for your public project? Can you share?
Yeah, so I worked closely with some of my fellow social work students to organize this type of protest, this type of rally in a way that was in collaboration with a bunch of other social work students who are studying in New York City. There's this part of the curriculum where we're supposed to be earning 1,200 hours worth of internship experience, where we're placed at a different agency, a school, as a social work intern. And the requirement to sit for the licensing exam to be a social worker is that you need 900 hours. And yet, all the schools with this program are having students work for 1,200 hours. And this is unpaid work, we're as an intern. So we had this realignment campaign and we were successful. Thankfully it all worked out, where we are able to have all the deans of the school. We organized all together to have the deans of the school commit to changing the policy for 900 hours. And it really came from a bunch of, students coming together to, of course, organize their professors, to have their professors tell the head chairs and head chairs tell the committee and all that hierarchy that we have in higher education. But the protest rally, it was at the Washington Square Park, of course, where students love to congregate. We had music. We had this really fun type of piñata where most of the materials for my budget went to. A piñata that was in the shape of a boulder, and we had students write on it all the things that are literally a burden for them as a social work student, as an intern, as a personal, as a life being. And they wrote down what was on their mind, and then we crushed it. And then part of that, we had food, snacks, we had chalk, we did designs on the floor, we had speakers, we had poets. Chris Smalls even made an appearance, which was really interesting. So a lot of my budget went towards organizing that type of protest rally.
Thank you, Django. And it's very cool again to say you can look at our projects page to see the range of different kinds of projects that people have done, but it's nice to hear directly from somebody in their project and to hear some ideas of like what you spent your money on, because the budget can go, your budget can be in different places. We will probably wrap up shortly, but I think we might, okay, about a specific project here. We might answer that directly in the chat. It seems pretty specific. Sorry, I'm just reading it. The type of project we're looking for. I guess in terms of like, what is there a question about what a social practice project is? Maybe we could just give a broad definition of social practice project. Does that sound good, Chloe?
Yes, absolutely. So for us, and this is just a definition for us, a social practice project is one that is dealing directly, which is to say in communication with directly whatever community of your choice outside of CUNY. That can be your neighborhood, that can be somebody international, that can be really anybody you want beyond CUNY, but it's not just writing about them or making work about them. It is working directly in concert with other people in a non-CUNY community towards the completion of a project. So Paula, I can say specifically like the topic of your novel, and it's featured community sounds very, very interesting, but unless you're proposing events and projects that directly involve those folks, I would still say it is not necessarily a social practice project for us.
Yeah, and if you are curious to hear from some of our fellows, it's a question I ask in every episode of our podcast. I ask people to talk about what they think about as social practice, because people do come at it from different angles, but the what Chloe mentioned is key there in working with other people in that project. Very welcome. Thank you, everybody. This has been fantastic questions. It's been really great to hear from everybody who's come through. This is recorded. Everyone who's registered, even, you know, if you attended live or if you couldn't make it live, you're going to get a copy of this recording so you can review it. Corey put in the chat, our email, if you have any questions, is spcuny@gmail.com, and we will make sure the right person gets that question and answers any follow-ups you may have. spcuny@gmail.com. Applications close April 30th. And end of day, I mean, that's vague, I think, on our website, but end of day, April 30th.
As long as you send it in by, 11:59 p.m. on April 30th, that will probably be fine, because the chances that we start looking over these applications on April 30th is literally none.
Yeah. So 11:59 p.m. New York City time on April 30th. Get your applications in by then. Please reach out if you have any questions. And again, spcuny@gmail.com. You'll get this recording as soon as possible. Thank you again. Good luck with your applications. Thank you for your interest in SPCUNY, and we hope to be reading your applications soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, thanks.
Bye.